Pow Comic Hour with your hosts, Andrew Honor
and Chris Ramos.
Tonight, we review Guardians of the Galaxy by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning Omnibus. And we're talking about this book tonight because of the recent release of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the end cap to James Gunn's vision for the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Movie number 3, and that's why we're kind of jumping in to say, hey, there's a lot of Guardians of the Galaxy stories out there, but this one is closer to the storyline right now, right?
So this run starts around 2008 era, and as you can see on issue number 1 of the cover, we are introduced to Star-Lord, Phyla-Vell, who's Quasar, Adam Warlock, Rocket Raccoon, Drax the Destroyer, Gamora, the Assassin. And you might say, oh, I recognize these characters from the screen, or they will be in Guardians of the Galaxy 3 in the trailers. And we've kind of taken our time just growing into these characters or getting introduced to them, because when Guardians of the Galaxy, the first movie, came out, it was a really risky move on their part because nobody knew who those characters were.
Yeah, I mean, now it doesn't really seem that risky in the Marvel movie lineup because there's been some sort of off the wall movies in between. But if you look at when Guardians of the Galaxy number 1 came out, there really wasn't anything else goofy, sort of.
Sure.
I keep saying goofy, but you know what I mean? Just like a little bit not so serious. It was like Iron Man 2 and everything else. It was pretty serious movies.
Absolutely. And they weren't around during the original Avengers, but it was after the fact. They're like, oh, let's introduce new characters, new themes. How can we grow our cosmic side of Marvel?
Yeah, and see how their audience can be stretched.
Absolutely. And take some chances. And they got some pretty high caliber actors to help out and just breathe life in these characters. Getting Chris Pratt involved, they transformed his career. He was on Parks and Recreation, and they were like, "Oh, hey, he's a unsung, kind of under the radar actor. Let's bring him into a leadership role,
almost like an unsung."
Dave Bautista, who was known for his wrestling career, they brought him as Drax the Destroyer, and I'm trying to think who
Karen Gillan,
yes, who was big Doctor Who actor
at that time,
and just really wanted to kind of put some power behind this and just kind of grow this team and try to make them relatable, even though they're out in space.
Well, I think that's why even in comics, I don't know if it's a trope, but I mean, even in comics, they try to have at least 1 or 2 humans within a group,
right,
so that we can connect on that sort of human level. Of Peter Quill is sort of a reflection of how we would want to travel the solar systems, but also what we would envision ourselves as. He goes up against huge, crazy aliens.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
It's like he holds his own as a human.
Yeah, and he's kind of the fearless warrior, is a little bit out of his element.
A little reckless, right?
Reckless, yes. And Star-Lord has his own Han Solo, I'd say Indiana Jones kind of feels with his character. So he's a little bit of a gunslinger and kind of like you said, reckless. And but he loves his music and everything and retro, because that's when he was kind of plucked out, and
his helmet gives him at least some sort of invulnerability a little bit.
A little translating, and it's kind of this identifying symbol. And so bringing it back to the book, it was really kind of a well-rounded team when Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning were co-writing this book. It was after this huge crossover event Marvel put together called Annihilation and Annihilation Conquest, where there was kind of there wasn't a lot of cosmic things going on at the time, and they wanted to shake this up with an event. Okay, we're going to bring all the cosmic side of characters together to band together against Annihilus, which is a huge Fantastic Four villain from the Negative Zone. Very wild, wacky character, and he wants to take over the universe, kind of wipe it out, and things like that, the Annihilation Wave. And so characters like Star-Lord and Drax the Destroyer and Gamora and Adam Warlock, and I think maybe Rocket was in there, I'm not too sure. But they said, okay, these are kind of some prominent characters. And so it's okay, how about we take, after this event wraps up, these characters really stick out to us. We would love to work with them. How can we do that? Let's put them together as a team and reignite Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy was originally formed as a team in 1969. But it had nothing to do with this team.
and you know, back to the 60s and 70s and 80s, I mean, whenever Marvel or DC for that matter, or any other independent comic, you know, they were just throwing characters out by themselves, and they were throwing characters out paired up, and okay, how about a sidekick? Okay, how about we're part of a team? And just seeing what sticks. And it's kind of funny because some of those early stories from the 60s and 70s, maybe they never really got as popular as we would consider them, but maybe in the day they were popular enough. Well, now modern writers can look at those and say, hey, I'm going to take that team and sort of bring them back.
Absolutely.
And that's what Marvel does too. And if you start there and you're like, hey, I'm a new writer, they're not just going to hand you Spider-Man. They're going to kind of throw you a team maybe that, you know, have been through one or two iterations and said, well, let's see what you can do with this thing.
Absolutely. What vision can you bring to it?
Yeah.
And so that original team, and you might recognize a few of these names. It's Vance Astro, Martin X, Captain Charlie 27, and Yondu, especially Yondu. And Starhawk was a later addition to the team when Jim Valentino, who works at Image Comics, took it over in like the mid to late 80s with his run. And like though that iteration of the team lasted till about 1992, 1994, then it kind of got dropped. So it took like nearly 20 to 30 years to bring this team, to refigure it and to bring it back. And there's some great homages during this run that pay tribute back to that, to the original team. So that was really cool. And even in the movie, we get to see Sylvester Stallone as Starhawk, which was like, wow, okay, that's really cool. And you see like Martin X, who's kind of like the crystal looking guy. And of
course,
Yondu, you know, Michael Rooker is Yondu. That was, you know, a very obscure character, even to this team. And to see that happen and how that changed his career and gave him some new life and reinvigorated his role in the team and acting, that was so cool.
Well, and like the other sort of great part of even reading comics right now while there are movies, it's because there's so much story that's involved in the panels of a comic book that really is devoted to entire arcs that they just can't jump into in a movie. So you have to sort of give them credit to take pieces of it that they think will work, like Yondu, you know, and say, hey, this person would translate really well on the screen. And this other guy, we're going to sort of drop off and make, you know, changes here and there. One of them is the group that's together is, you know, Quasar is an old school character.
Yeah,
Quasar,
that has ties to like Captain Marvel.
Yes, like way back. And I remember Quasar when the Infinity Gauntlet was out and things.
Yes.
You know, I mean, that was another big
cosmic event.
I think that was, so for me, that was my first cosmic event was Infinity Gauntlet, because it exploded on the scene of comics in, what did I say? 90?
Yeah, 91.
Yeah. In 1991. So it was a 6-issue story, Infinity Gauntlet, and turned into Infinity War and all that.
Yeah.
But for us, when we were kids reading it, it was like the first time that all of our characters that we knew were involved in a huge cosmic event.
That was like, you took every single Marvel character title that were major in the time and you put them against the most powerful cosmic entity, which was Thanos at the time.
Yeah. And wasn't that like the first huge crossover maybe?
Yeah,
something like
I
that?
would say
it really worked
one of the really major ones that were like, let's bring every character.
Yeah. I just remember it was, and it was one of those where at that time, now Marvel does it all the time, but at that time, they said, hey, this is going to shake up the whole universe. This is going to be totally different. Everyone's going to be different. Yeah. And we're like, well, we believed it. And they've done that a few more times afterwards. But at that time, we believed it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was written by Jim Starlin, who came up with Drax the Destroyer and Adam Warlock. And I think he did Captain Marvel, or at least had some ties to that. And Adam Warlock was like
maybe
a Jack
Gamora.
Kirby. Adam Warlock was like a Jack Kirby thing that Jim Starlin was like, oh, I can really shake up this character. Watch this. And so he's really taken some ownership to that character. And even like Thanos, he created Thanos, which was like one of the biggest villains since like King the Conqueror. So it was such a cool thing to like see that come in. And now we got to see on the big screen. And I'm sure I've met Mr. Starlin. He's pretty odd about what his visions come like to life. So
they've turned everything into. Yeah.
Yeah. Even though like the movies are they take their own liberties and adaptations to the comic. It's a different interpretation, but it flows really well as comparatively. And I think, even this run, this was just a new vision. They're like, hey, let's try it. So there's no right or wrong. Sure, there's some things that could have been better. And so things like, oh man, I wish the character did this. But you know what? There's still time. They're still making movies. They'll figure out a way to bring it back. And it's really cool to see what journey these characters go on.
Well, so like back to the story so we read 25 issues of the Guardians of the Galaxy run, and it's kind of like it just sort of starts like you just jump into the team and you just see them fighting, and it's like they're a team already. And as you're kind of reading through it, you realize that there's like a narrative that they're following, this sort of main storyline. There's tons of side quests and offshoots. And
absolutely. Everybody has their own like motivations, why they're there and things like that.
They introduce some other, villain base that you're like, well, how the heck are they gonna? And every single time, at least for me, when you read Cosmic, it's like nothing can just be very simple. It has to be like world shattering, city destroying, this is a far spread, belief system, and now they're going to tear it all down kind of thing. But one thing that really jumped out was the Guardians of the Galaxy team wasn't called Guardians of the Galaxy at the time. Like they didn't adapt
right.
that name. They were just thrown together, and they just sort of had this kind of bond, but Peter Quill sort of held them together.
Yes.
And then there were interviews that are running through the comic.
I kind of felt it was almost like The Office, where they, it's just you and the camera, and they're like telling like, oh man, that was freaky.
They're telling about
here's what they really thought of that scene or what they were motivating. I really like that like storytelling, like narration device.
And like that to me, while you're reading this, if you were a new reader, that allows you to understand the character of each member, because Rocket Raccoon speaks way different, and he just says this crazy stuff. And then it goes back to like Adam Warlock, who so Adam Warlock that I remember wasn't like a space magician or whatever. He's like a mage now or something.
Yes. So they kind of a little bit, because he gets reincarnated every once in a while, and in this latest reincarnation that he's more of a
they call him a battle mage.
Battle mage.
A universal
which actually makes it a little bit more realistic. It kind of grounds it, I guess, more. Because Adam Warlock from like Infinity War and stuff, he was this huge like cosmic warrior. They kind of like a space Jesus, they kind of described him at the time.
Well, he just had power, and you were like, what is he? What can he do? Like he just had power.
Yep.
And I do like in this story that every once in a while Adam Warlock will like announce like, oh, I'm going to do a healing spell, literally, like, or I'm going to do a dispelment for travel.
Sure.
And it was like,
and I almost think when I look at this team and I'm reading the run, I almost think of like my D&D party, like, okay, you need the battle mage, you need the rogue, you need the leader, like a bard, you need like a ranger and things like that. So, or a barbarian or a fighter. So I'm like, okay, here's translates into a space cosmic team.
And so this is right after Annihilation, which is another great cosmic run. And Drax the Destroyer, which everyone, pretty much remembers.
Yes.
He's sort of like
he's a little bit more serious compared to his movie adaptation.
They did make him way goofy. They made him like a child in the movie almost.
Yeah, it's a child.
Maybe like a 9-year-old. I don't know. Not like a child.
Right. We love
Younger.
him, but he's a little more serious and like a fighter assassin kind of thing. But he has like strong ties to, the cosmic history and everything. And especially like Annihilation, he was a huge role in that. But so they're going through this mission, they're fighting, and they're kind of taking on latest threats. And Adam Warlock's like, after what happened in Annihilation, there's this the universe is having these fissures, and the fissures broken. And after enough fissures in space time, the universe is just going to shatter. It's going to just be the end of the world.
And he can see it differently than others, so he's really trying to stop that.
Yes.
And the Guardians are sort of along for the ride.
Absolutely. And Star-Lord's mentality is, hey, we want to prevent the next Annihilation wave. We want to stop the problem before it gets worse. So we're going to form a team to take care of those problems. So they kind of go with this mentality, that's what we're going to do. We're going to save the day proactively.
And almost just hop across the universe. And, sometimes they wreck things, but, most of the time they're, I want to say like, they're okay almost just throwing themselves on the front line.
Right.
Like that's just the job that they took on themselves. And they don't really have anyone else to, report to. It's just themselves. Mm-hmm. And, sometimes when you see them, you think, wow, they're pretty overpowered. I mean, they've got Quasar now, who's a girl.
Yep. She has like quantum light-based powers, kind of like Captain Marvel does in the movie.
And she can make a sword.
Yeah, like light constructs. Almost like a Green Lantern-y kind of thing.
And then they have Drax, who is just pretty much...
Drax and Gamora.
He's very much like a super fighter.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
More of a super fighter than just sort of a bulldozer that he is in the movie. And then they come across Major Victory.
Yes, absolutely.
So what do you know about Major Victory?
Well, actually, so outside of this run, I don't know too much. I know he has ties to the old team, which was, again, we were talking about kind of the crossing over that old team with the new team and kind of doing some ties back to that. But
he's from the future.
He is from the future. Yep, absolutely. And that is correct. And he, if he is like he has like almost a bodysuit that contains his self. And if that bodysuit were to get to tear open, like he could die.
Because he's like out of
the 30th century or whatever it is.
And he's out of his timeline. So his timeline got destroyed or something, right? So so he technically shouldn't exist. But he does.
But he got stuck in like what was it? Like time travel ice or something like that.
Quantum
ice, yeah. So he gets thawed out and becomes part of the team. And he actually, when we first meet him in this run, he's holding Captain America's shield.
From the future.
From the future. So it was like this, wow, okay, what's to his character? And he very much has those leadership qualities, but he doesn't have his memory. So he has this very much soldier out of time mentality to him, kind of like actual Captain America.
Yeah,
does.
I mean, he's pretty tough, so that's good. He's got another tough person on their team.
Absolutely, we do get to see Groot.
Yes.
Groot's when we meet him for the first time, like he's just in like a pot and he's a little sapling.
Because in Annihilation, he got like almost totally destroyed, right?
Something, could have been.
They saved a little piece of him or something like that. But he eventually grows pretty big, like actually a lot bigger than they show in the movies and things.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like when we first meet him in Volume 1, I would say.
Yeah.
Close to that range, but he does get bigger.
And then they kind of pick up some people along the way. Of course, Cosmo.
Yes, Cosmo,
the dog.
And I'm so excited for our listeners to actually see them on the big screen. So, and actually hear some dialogue and things like that. Because Cosmo is one of my favorite characters in the Guardians of the Galaxy run.
and so Cosmo is a psychic dog.
Psychic Russian dog.
Psychic Russian dog that was like a space cosmonaut.
Yeah, absolutely. So his tie is like in the 80s when they were sending animals and pets into space, he was part of that. And when he got into space, he was altered. So he gets one of the side effects was he got telepathy and telekinesis. Which was pretty cool, and now he's like the leader of nowhere, which is kind of which was accurate to the movie where it's in a dead celestial's head,
and that's their
so he's like the head of security, and he kind of is like a member of the team essentially. He's like not a member, but he's always goes on other missions. He's kind of like the nowhere.
They're smart to bring him with.
Absolutely, such a great character.
So while you're reading through this particular run of Guardians of the Galaxy, yes, there are some artists that change hands, but the writing stays solid. Mm-hmm. And the nice part about it is, like we said before, that it seems like their overarching storyline is against this religious cult.
Yes, the Universal Church of Truth. I
yes, believe. And they have believers, and as long as their believers are believing, they have found a way to tap into that
belief energy battery,
and it's pretty tough.
Yeah, they were kind of an interesting villain because they're the writers aren't necessarily going for the religion aspect; they're going for like maybe like a crusade kind of thing, or
that's what I got too. Yeah, that absolutely. It wasn't like they were trying to make some sort of
religious statement. No.
And the Guardians themselves are so reckless that for them to have the idea of a belief system or the idea of a religion is just counterproductive. They're not even mercenaries. They're just like a ragtag group of hoodlums.
Yes.
And for them to take anything serious long enough to say like, I believe in something,
right,
it is difficult. So you kind of get that storyline within the team, and then Adam Warlock is like
kind of
like you should worship him, sort of.
They're kind of like, he's our leader. He is we have prophesized Warlock as this great savior to us, but okay, if he doesn't agree with us, we're totally going against you. We're kind of forcing you to come with us. And he's like, no, I don't want to be a part of that. Well, you are now. So they keep fighting him because all Warlock wants to do is fix time and space on the fissures that are happening.
And they want him to sort of settle down a little bit.
Yeah. Like, and he's like, I don't want to do that.
Run their cult.
So it's kind of like this interesting conflict to them. And you kind of figure out there's way more to this universal truth than on the surface. So that was really cool to explore that space. Just a different villain. And we just kind of keep going through, and you find out like different reasons of why the team came together, and different like ulterior motives to it. And Mantis is obviously, we get introduced to her. She's another psychic.
So her power, Mantis, again in the movie, has those like two really thin sort of antenna. Mm-hmm. The girl, but in the comic, so she can see future storylines.
She could see a little bit of the future with her. It's almost a divination power, but she's a psychic, and she knows, she's like an expert, like a kung fu person.
So like if you're gonna fight her, she sort of knows.
Absolutely, we do get to see some of that. And the only thing is, like, she's more of a green alien, and she also remembers everything she did when she was on the Avengers as well. Because she was part of the storyline called Celestial Madonna Saga, and I haven't read that yet, but I heard it was a big thing. I haven't read everything, folks, but it was really cool. So she's a big, like, kind of glue to the team as well. She's really trying to help Star-Lord keep the team together.
So who is? I know you've kind of mentioned a lot of them are your favorite character, but who's one of your standout characters?
Oh man, so
in this run, because I know you've read a lot of Cosmo.
Absolutely. I like Adam Warlock to see his journey because of his ties to Infinity Gauntlet and things like that. Star-Lord's really cool. He has a different leadership model. Rocket actually has the best dialogue.
Well, and Rocket is, I think, the most surprising to people because, on the surface, he's a raccoon.
Or talking raccoon. Sorry.
He's a little raccoon.
Yes.
But he does have some skills, and actually, he touches on every once in a while, as much as you think these people are together as any good team up would tell you, as much as you think they're together just out of circumstance, they actually really do like each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, there are some moments where they step back. Even Star-Lord steps back, and Peter Quill, and he says, I've got a lot of regrets in my life, and I've done a lot of things that I'm not proud of.
Yep.
But he kind of brings it around. Like, the thing I'm most proud of is this team.
Absolutely. And when they start to break away, like Rocket's like one of the people are like, really, we're breaking away with this after we're already here.
Yeah,
we're already doing good. We believe what we're doing, but we don't like the circumstances. Let's change that around. Or he'll keep things going while people take a break and come back and things like that. But he still has like a good personality. They really developed that character well, and he's still funny.
And I really
very
like
quippy
Adam Warlock too. But I remember actually when I was reading this, I was like, oh, he does have a dark side. Like,
yeah, there was more. Yeah, absolutely.
He has Magus, which
is that was a big like villainous side to during the initial like Infinity Run.
I think Infinity War is where Magus appeared, and he's like, it's like his skin turns blue and he just gets like crazy, and
I'm glad they dropped the Afro part though.
Yes, it's a different persona, and he literally turns into this like Dr. Jekyll and Mr.
Yes,
Hyde
absolutely.
thing.
I think you nailed that
really
analogy. Absolutely. But it only happens when he's like super spent. And you can't maintain that personality starts.
He has to
come
like hold him back.
Yeah, absolutely. And after all of his energy is expended, like that's when he takes over, and then like it takes like all their power and all their effort to beat the Magnus and things like that.
Yeah, Magus like is like has no problem just killing people.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he's ultimate evil. Yeah, lawful evil. Absolutely, he's all of that. And so it was really interesting that you can bring and pick and choose those things out of like the original Infinity Gauntlet storyline and make that really interesting, compelling during this run.
And it's just like as I'm even flipping through the story too, there's so many characters in it, but that was almost the charm of this story.
Absolutely.
So this run, again, was right after Annihilation. What year did we say?
2008 was this
2008. Run. So the first Guardians movie came out in 2014.
Yeah.
So they had, plenty of storyline, but it's nice to see that all of these landscapes and all of these different planets they go to, they all have a pretty compelling story in their own right. Absolutely. It's almost like an adventure of the week kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And then when they show this in the movie, it's like, wow, the movie, as crazy as the movie was, if people have read this comic, I think it kind of puts the movie in perspective.
Absolutely. Or it's like, hey, I want to know more about their adventures and stuff before or during after the events of like volume 3, like what could have happened, or maybe what happened during that space.
Where would you go?
Would you go from there? You're like, oh, hey, I loved watching Guardians of the Galaxy. Where do I start? This is a great place to start.
And then who is Jack Flag?
Jack Flag? I'm not entirely sure as well.
I was going to look him up. The name sounds familiar, and he has like red, white, and blue hair.
Bug was part of like the Micronauts. He was very like niche character.
I didn't know if Jack Flag was a Starjammer, but I guess not.
No, I don't think he was. Although it was cool to like see Starjammers.
Yeah, sure.
So I guess we could touch upon that. It's a good segue. So during this run, they had to tie in with certain Marvel events that were going at the time. And you're like, oh, but Annihilation was there. Yeah, that happened over there in the cosmic side of things.
Annihilation was done. So they wrapped it up.
Yeah, there was Civil War, they mentioned it very little bit, but that happened right before as well, kind of the same time as Annihilation was going on. And then they had Secret Invasion, which was the Skrulls, who were like green shape-shifting aliens who were introduced in like Fantastic Four that can take shape of any human, power set, things like that, and replicate it. They got way more advanced. And so there's this whole like infiltration plotline where it was the tagline when they were doing it was like, who do you trust?
Yeah, because anyone could be a Skrull.
Yeah.
In disguise.
Right. So that was one plotline they tie in, which they do very well of. And then War of the Kings was the other more popular one. War of the Kings was this big, like the Shi'ar and then the Kree were fighting over supremacy of the cosmic galaxy. And like the Inhumans get involved. They lead the Kree because they have ties into that. It was all a big cosmic thing. But it was really cool to see that because they don't go like a whole 360 into it. They're kind of like halfway. They try to be mediators of the situation, but it also gives a chance for the characters to interact with the rest of the Marvel universe. So I felt that was kind of a cool tie-in as well as appropriate.
Yeah, and they didn't make it where, you felt like they needed to bring in other storylines to strengthen this one because it had its own, good run.
No, absolutely. An editorial comes along. It's kind of like, hey, you kind of have to do a tie-in.
Yeah,
it's part of the big two. They have sometimes they just mandatory have to do things like that.
Like your story's doing good.
Doing good.
Bring some others and introduce
some tie-ins. Every company loves a good tie-in.
Now the other thing I noticed in this story here is that everyone almost has like either two personalities or sort of a past life and a new life. And
yes,
like even
I would say that's accurate.
Yeah, even Quasar sort of like it's almost like they evolved into something else.
Yes.
Like and someone could argue that Peter Quill was like human and then he was Star-Lord. Yeah, and it's like that's his thing.
Yeah,
and sometimes people call him Starman.
He's
like he gets really mad. It's Star-Lord.
Yeah, Star-Lord. He kind of does that in the movie still as well.
It's just his thing.
Like,
he wants
what's the name of your team? Guardians of that what?
Yeah. He's protective of that because to him, I think Star-Lord is like living out his sort of childhood dream. Like it's pretty easy to say like he has his own like he wants the team to do good because it's a reflection of like just him doing good.
Yes. I totally agree with that. Yeah. He wants his team to do well. He wants it to succeed. He doesn't like failure. And when he does fail, he always doubles down on his efforts to try to redeem themselves. And it's basically like a Space Avengers kind of thing, except it's a little more wild.
Yeah. Wild. Well, and then they all sort of near the end of the run, they all start wearing this outfit together. They get like the blue uniform with the red stripe
which you see finally in volume 3. We get the uniform, the matching uniform. It's almost like it took 3 movies, but they're
part of it. They're together. That's what it is.
Because they start out with them right away in volume 1, and even though they go iterations of it, it's like, okay, we came together.
Now then the Quasar changed. She changed into her.
Yes. Very cosmic entities kind of said, hey, we have a bigger storyline for you. Okay. We have a bigger mission for you. That was a whole thing.
So she kind of like embraces death
and then they bring like Moondragon back and their lovers and things like that. Her and Phyla-Vell Quasar have like a relationship they go on and things like that. And it's just really cool to see. There was so much going on, but yet it was easy to follow and it was really well paced, I thought.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I mean, they would bring in like as far as when you're reading a cosmic story, you want to see a little bit of, like we said, the Starjammers. They're really popular pirates, and you want to see a little bit of the Kree
Skrull conflicts and Shi'ar.
Yep. And
kind of actually, it's a good
they brought in some of the
of like Marvel Cosmic. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's like, okay, here's the Inhumans. Okay, here's what's happening with Thanos.
Sure.
Like,
the negative zone. We go there for a bit. Yeah.
It's like they have to get this checklist of everything.
Yes.
And the neat thing is that every artist and writer have their own take on what that is. And when you're in the cosmic universe, jumping from the future to the past, from one time flux to the other, it's like up to you to just make it
up.
Make up what, and if you get stuck, well, they can just say, oh, we found this quasar limiter, blah blah, and then they get out of it. So
absolutely,
it's like probably a little bit of a writer's dream and a writer's nightmare, because they don't want to step on too many toes that have built this up before them.
And ultimately, when they were writing this, they were like, okay, so they were also working on Nova. Nova was a huge part of cosmic everything, and they knew they had some ties that he helps kind of sets up the team with Star-Lord. He's like, okay, I'll help you get these people. And then they're also like the visionaries for the War of the King saga. And so they know like where these characters are going and things like that. So they had a roadmap, but this was like the team where they kind of get to get that roadmap of the galaxy and things like that. They get to go on the adventures and tell like their story.
See, now I feel like this story is a little neat introduction to the cosmic world writing.
Mm-hmm.
Probably easier than jumping right into Annihilation.
Yeah,
maybe.
you were talking about that.
Yeah, it's like some of those you have to find sort of the right niche that makes sense to you. Some people want to read Fantastic Four and get their sort of cosmic introduction that way.
Sure.
Some people might go all the way back to Infinity Gauntlet and read
Absolutely.
that, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of start from that aspect. But I think the Marvel movies, what they've really helped new readers with is to use the movies as the like primer.
Yes.
Because honestly, if you watch the movie first and then you read this after it,
Mhm.
and I usually don't say that. We usually say, hey, read the comic, and the
Yeah.
movie is kind of neat to see, but you know, read the comic. But honestly, if you watch the Guardians of the Galaxy movie and then read this, it kind of makes a little more sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Because this was your first time reading this, right?
Yeah, I haven't read this run, and I've read like I'm familiar with the Guardians of the Galaxy as a comic form outside
And
of the movie.
a few of the characters that we read.
And they've always been like writing tools, so they'll pop in and like, oh, we're the Guardians, and then they'll like leave again.
Sure.
In different storylines. But usually I think that they were characters they brought in on a huge crossover events.
Yes.
Where this one was nice just to see them doing their thing by themselves.
Sure. And for me, I actually picked up issue 1 when this came out in 2008. And I actually have a pretty decent collection of singles in that. I would love to finish the run. I probably have about 20 singles of this.
Out of the 25.
Of the 25. So I'm pretty happy about that. Although for me, rereading this, because I haven't read this material and it's been probably about 10 years or so, 10, 12 years, because that's when I started getting more into comics. This was super rewarding because the issues I didn't own, I got to read. Especially that's the best thing about omnibuses.
Yeah.
You know, they have the whole run right there. And then there's like little side events that continue off after this run and things like that, that kind of, you still use the same team or principles of it. And so I was like, oh, okay, this is so cool and rewarding, because I always wondered, I missed like issue 9 or issue 10. I went, well, what happened when we meet this villain? And then we jumped over here. Oh no, I missed that part.
And actually for this story, if you do skip an issue or two, so much has happened.
Absolutely.
It's like, there's a lot to sort of reflect or catch back on.
And it's not too bad if you missed 1 or 2 when it was coming out, but man, it just makes the story so much more cohesive, and you kind of know where the character's been, what they've went through, and why they're thinking in this new mentality than they started.
Yeah, and the omnibus actually, so it has Guardians of the Galaxy 1 through 25, and then it has the Thanos Imperative, which is 8 issues, and then Rocket Raccoon and Groot, which is another 8 issues. So it's got some fun stories at the end of it.
Kind of continues to
we're
promote
just focusing
reading
on that 25 issue run from Abnett,
just so it was more focused in on the actual initial run.
Well, and a lot of people do still tie this run, but as sort of a definitive modern Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, I would say
like, this is it.
Yeah, this is the jumping on point.
This is the one to read.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the other Guardians of the Galaxy, the classic runs, are collected in 2 other runs, the Jim Valentino Omnibus, then Tomorrow's Heroes. So that's really cool. And then after this run, the Brian Michael Bendis we talked about when we did Ultimate Spider-Man, you know, after this run came over, he did Guardians of the Galaxy for a little bit. Now Al Ewing is doing Guardians of the Galaxy, and it just keeps continuing, especially, you know, with the popularity of the movies and stuff. But I've never read beyond this point because I'm almost a little afraid to explore that territory because I'm like, whoa, they start going on about Peter's father, and it's way different than the movie. And it's just different preferences, because sometimes it's where you start reading.
So you're a little bit of like, I like this story so much, I don't want them to try to redact it or anything
exactly.
Like that.
And that's hard. I mean, someday I might go read those stories and discover that path. But right now I like my comfort food. Or maybe I like going back to like where this started in the origins and kind of seeing how those comics evolved. But that's just my personality taste right now with reading.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times you see some things you like in a story and it'll lead you into another one. And that's, one of the overarching things that we like about the podcast is people might say, hey, you know what? I really enjoyed reading, Saga. What other things are like that? How
Absolutely.
can I find that in another form, or what story, sort of relates to Guardians of the Galaxy? If you like that kind of, adventure pacing, off the wall group kind of activities.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of those out there too.
Yeah. Like they're always trying to do another retelling or reiteration of Annihilation. Like the Annihilators part, the Last Scourge. They're always trying to rehash that. So
there's so many stories that you can use in cosmic world.
Yeah.
Then like we said,
or Thanos, how do we bring back Thanos?
Yeah. And then once he's back, what is this just
what's his motivation?
Does he go back to what he was doing before, or are we trying to do that?
Absolutely.
But yeah, this book has a little bit of everything. It's got Kang in there. It's got everything. Yeah. So it's awesome. Good run for everyone.
Yeah. And I guess the major artist that was on this run was Paul Pelletier. And he did a great job. I love the art when he was on it. The other artists were okay.
Yeah, they were okay.
They're okay. They were a little rough for my taste because Paul Pelletier was very detailed and great figures that had. And just, it was kind of like when we reviewed Ivan Reis, when we talked about Aquaman, like when people step off of it, he made those characters such identifiable that when you do something else with it, it's like, whoa, okay, that's a little weird.
Well, and sometimes, I mean, like you said, I like my sort of comfort food. Sometimes it pulls me away from the story when the art is so disjointed.
Yes.
And I'm a huge believer, and everyone's heard me talk about it on the podcast before, of just tying the artist to the story. And to me, if those are disjointed, even if it's just my opinion, it's hard to fight back to the narrative that you want. You know?
And Paul Pelletier, he's did a lot of different comics. I think he had a small run on She-Hulk, and he's been around the Marvel universe a bit. So he's got some great work in the comics area. So, and also this was like the first like major Guardians of the Galaxy series I've read, or at least major comics. So looking at somebody else's art, I'm like, oh, it's not that.
Yeah.
So it's a little hard to pull away from. I did appreciate like when it changed art in a different timeline, because they do some time traveling and things. I'm like, okay, that's appropriate because it's a whole different timeline. So you can kind of differentiate that. But it's like, okay, look, when we get back to the main story, the main continuity, all right, here it is.
Yeah, and they had some great covers for this too.
Oh, absolutely breathtaking covers.
Really catchy.
I remember growing up, like those would be my like desktop wallpaper on my computer. I'm like, oh, these are
Salvador
so pretty.
LaRocca. I mean, it's so awesome. And they tied that into the story pretty perfectly. Sometimes,
yes, absolutely. Even if it's not directly tied into it, you have to have a good cover artist. You can't get around it. It might not happen in the story, but man, it just draws you into what's going to happen.
Yeah, Clint Langley did the first 7 issues.
Yeah, and his were
just tied you.
Yeah, those were iconic to say the least. I don't know, especially with the initial run. Loved it. But yeah, this is a great jumping on point to Guardians of the Galaxy, the 2008 run by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning. They're the ones that have the Marvel Universe Cosmic Bible that kind of did it during that time era. And if you like this run, there's plenty of cosmic stuff they do. Definitely look at those writers. They've did so much in comic books. Highly recommend checking out their work.
Yes.
Yeah, and visiting. And if you can pick up the omnibus or read it digitally, we highly recommend that as well. They do have trades out of it, but this is like a cohesive run that works together.
Yeah. Try to track down the Omni.
Yeah, it's pretty. It's still widely available. I think you can still pick it up here and there. And I'm sure there might be a time where they reprint it. And yeah, we definitely recommend checking it out. This has been another great episode of Bam Pow Comic Hour. This is Andrew Glonner
and Chris Ramos
signing off.